This is the .NET Dev Show, and this is a special party episode because you're not stuck watching me fail at my code for an hour. I have some very special friends here with me. So we are going to talk about Uno platform. We're going to talk about designer-developer handoff and how that story can improve. I have brought along some very good friends of mine from all around the world. So let's introduce them one at a time. Nick Randolph, and you, sir, should not be here because you are down under in Australia, right? Which part of Australia?
Yeah, so I'm on the East Coast in Sydney.
East Coast.
And yes, technically, like most people, I should probably be asleep. But because I get to hang out with this awesome group of people, I tend to work evenings or very late into the early morning. So my body clock's a little screwy. So this is kind of like my morning, but it's not.
It's like 2 a.m. for you?
Yeah, it's just after 1 because we're going through that patch where we're changing over the time zone. So during my summer, it would have been about 2 a.m. But yeah.
Now, are you in like hiding in a closet away from your family?
Yeah, like pretty much. No. Yeah, so I'm just in a private office.
Cool.
So, yeah.
Well, we appreciate you taking the time in the middle of the night to come and join us. And Ludwig, how are you, sir?
Good morning, Sam. Well, it's morning for me in Montreal. Yeah. I'm doing great. I'm very honored to be here with you today. Thanks for inviting us. And I'm live from a muted little cubicle in my pop-up in Montreal.
Nice. And Matt?
Yes, good morning.
And Matt, you're in Montreal area as well?
Yeah, not too far from Ludwig, but definitely in different offices.
Good. And I'm from Pennsylvania, so the magic of technology. We are all on screen. Some of our friends are starting to show up. Hey, Salt and Burnham, you, Chris, good to see you. We are going to talk a little bit about design here today, Chris. I don't know if there's going to be CSS stuff in there to make you interested, but let's see. Let's get into design and dev. But before we start, just a quick word here. Today's .NET Dev Show is proudly brought to you by the folks over at Visual Studio Live. This is a premier software developer conference for .NET developers. Like some of us in this room here, Visual Studio brings together developers, architects, designers, and industry leaders from all around the world for some amazing amount of content. So I'm over here at VSLive.com, and you can see some of the things that are on offer. There's a lot of virtual training, but the real benefit is when you come and join for in-person events. And we just had VS Live in Vegas, and the next one that's coming up is in Chicago, Windy City. So mark your calendars for end of April to early May. So it should be nice in springtime in Chicago. So if you get into what Chicago has to offer, lots and lots of amazing speakers, except for one, which is me, who's not so amazing. But let me see if I can pull up the speaker list here. Tons of great content on .NET and design, and so anything latest and greatest in the Microsoft ecosystem is what you get. And this is, if Chicago doesn't fit your calendar, then there is more throughout the year. There is Microsoft Redmond that's coming up in early August, and then they always do a big show in Orlando. So, big cities in the US, a lot of international people come in as well, easy to travel to. So now, just to sweeten the deal, there is a special promo for all of you folks just watching the .NET Dev Show. So if you use that promo code, you get quite a bit off from registering and coming and joining us over at Visual Studio Live. So if any of that fits your travel plans, please come join. Let's get back into Uno platform, and I've heard things about Figma. So this whole designer-developer story, we have always wanted to make it better, but it seems like there is some friction. Like Ludwig and Nick, I know you as a developer. Matt, you are on the developer story as well. Like Ludwig, you're more on the design side, right?
Yeah, Yeah, I'm the one designer in the sea of developers.
No, you should not be here because we don't talk to each other, right?
Right. There should
Everything
be a
breaks.
wall. I
There
should
should,
be
there
throwing
should be a
stuff
wall.
over that
Yeah.
wall for you guys to catch, interpret,
That's
and
right. That's right. But we are trying to make this better. So maybe we should start with design, and maybe Nick or Matt, you folks can give us like a 1 minute pitch on what is Uno platform overall.
Sure. So Uno platform basically is cross-platform technology for building apps that work across mobile, desktop, web, pretty much anywhere that .NET runs with a screen or some sort of interface. The Uno platform will be there to cater for your needs. And fundamentally, it is about that core piece of technology that goes cross-platform. But on top of that, the platform part is where we really sort of come to the foreground with, extensions, toolkit, the plugins and the components that we're talking about for Figma. The idea is to not just have the basic building blocks, it's to basically actually provide a full-on platform that allows developers to go from, design and development to go from, early inception all the way through to delivery. And so, our charter is to basically try and make that process as easy and as streamlined as possible so that developers and designers can focus on actually building the logic of their apps, rather than having to fight the tooling all the time. So
Yeah, well said. I love that as, .NET developers, we have so much of choice now. Your code just goes to so many places, and it's all .NET that you're doing, and tooling is great. Ludwig, why don't we start with you? I'm going to bring up your desktop here. So first up, I think the rest of the group here comes from the dev background. So tell us a little bit about design here. Our good friend Salton Burnham is asking if it's real CSS that we're talking about. Maybe not many people know this or use it, but you could actually style XAML with CSS. It's for like a niche audience. But what is Figma to start with?
Well, Figma is a collaborative design tool, and it's started out targeting designers, but with a definitely dev point of view. And it has some really, really great features like multiplayer. So it's hosted on the web, so anyone with a browser can have access to it. You don't need a Mac. You don't need a certain platform, and it comes with a bunch of collaborative tools like communications. So basically, it's a designer tool here. Whoops, sorry, I'm in the wrong window. Let me jump in here. It's a designer tool where I can work, but I can communicate with Nick here, leaving a little note. I can tag him and tell him about what's going on here. I can indicate that elements are ready for development using these quick little tags, and and I can use what they call dev mode here to have a developer specific experience. So I kind of threw a bunch of stuff out there really quickly, but um, it's just to say that this is a tool that's trying to bridge the gap itself between designers and devs. And from here, I can design something and create like a basically a common source of truth that we can all work on. And they provide like really cool APIs that allow us to build on top of their own platform. And that's where Uno's come in, developing its own code generation plugin that allows a designer to design something here and then just generate UI code for it directly. So I'm not only leaving notes for a dev in here, I'm actually generating code in his own language that we can cooperate on. And we've also created a basic toolkit here, which is a design system that you're currently viewing. You can have access to it by doing a little search in the community here for Uno platform. So if I do this,
Hey,
I can search for plugins and components and resources. But yes,
Ludwig, you have said a lot of things. I have
oh, I'm talking
questions.
too fast.
No. You have just said a lot of things in just that short span. I have questions to kind of boil it down. So first up, Figma, you said this is all browser based.
It's all browser-based. Right now, you're seeing my desktop version
Okay.
of Figma, but you can create an account.
Hmm.
They have a free version that allows you access to almost every feature in Figma. So you can try out the workflow with your own team of devs and designers and see how that works for you without investing a ton or anything at all, actually. And you can have access to our resources, like our plugin and our design system files, through the community market that Figma provides.
Okay, so there is no barrier to entry. Anybody could get in and start. But you said so Figma is free, but there may be some things that you have to pay for.
Right, right. So it's a tiered approach. Um, so you have access to all features with the free account, except this one feature, which is called Dev Mode. Now, dev mode targets devs specifically by rearranging the UI in a dev-friendly manner. It moves a lot of the complexity and focuses on exporting properties and code directly. So this feature isn't free to try, but it is included in all the other packages. And it's a seating-based system, so you pay per person per month.
Yeah, fairly standard. Makes sense. Okay, so once you are in Figma as a
Mhm.
designer, maybe I mean this looks like you're trying to create designs for a mobile app.
Mhm.
So you could do web, you could do desktop, and this like you said you're on your desktop. So is this like a web view that's in a desktop app?
Exactly. Every one of these tabs here is showing me basically a web view. This whole thing is built on JSON, I believe. Correct
Oh,
me if I'm wrong,
interesting.
Nick.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think it's probably one of those cross-platform technologies. I'm not sure exactly which one, but essentially you can access this directly via the website. It works
Mhm.
perfectly in the browser.
Sure.
But
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
I quite often will just install the tools so it will install it as a tool because that way you get the desktop icon and it does all of the nice caching behavior and stuff like that. So
Yeah,
it's
and it will actually work offline
Oh,
when you're in
nice.
the desktop version, and then it will reconnect and sync to save all of your changes as all the files are kept online. So I
Oh,
prefer to
nice.
work on the desktop version because
Hmm.
it's less noisy, but it's essentially the same feature set.
Yeah. So when you come in here as a designer, you have your color palettes, you have wireframes that you are trying to create. What type of components can you drop on screen? Are these things you have to create from scratch?
Right. So there's two approaches. You can do the classic approach where you're designing and you're creating everything from scratch using these tools here at the top, where you can create shapes and input text. And you can, once you've created, let's see, I'll give an example here, created this beautiful rectangle. The properties panel appears here, and you can start customizing it like you would in any design app. But
Sure.
then there's
Yeah.
also a very rich marketplace um, where
Oh, so you can get more. Yeah.
you can get this is ours.
Uh-huh.
Of course, I'm promoting our own stuff.
Yeah. Sure.
Uh, but let's say someone mentioned CSS. I'll just type in this CSS
Chris is a
code
big
word.
fan of pure CSS. Like he doesn't like trade winds or anything
Mhm.
else. That's
Well,
fair.
and you can look for files and templates to start your design from. There are plugins that help you add functionality
I see. So
as
it's
well
an
as
ecosystem.
widgets.
It's a marketplace. Okay.
It's a
Yeah.
whole
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
marketplace and ecosystem. That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. And
So you don't have to start from scratch.
yeah, okay. No, that's good to know. So Chris is pointing out that the desktop version of Figma is probably written with Electron, and
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that. So no, nowadays with so much of modern cross-platform tech, it's easy to hate on Electron, but again, it works just fine on desktop if you know what you're doing resource-wise. VS Code, I think even Slack, like those are all everyday Electron apps that work just fine. So
Yeah.
yeah.
But Ludwig, I mean, you touched on the community portal there, where you can go and find other resources and stuff like that. And it is worth
Right.
touching on the difference between, say, some of the other sort of material toolkits that are out there versus, say, the one that
Right.
Uno's produced.
Yeah. So the file that you're currently looking at on my desktop is the Uno Platform Material Toolkit. So it's our flavor of the material design system. And the difference between the one that we're offering and other design systems that you might find is that we've tailored this with our dev team to kind of surface all the components that are included in here, um, surface the properties of the underlying WinUI components. And the the file itself uses a dev language in the sense that it uses the naming of those WinUI components. So we're creating a common language, common components, a common tool set to work with, kind of smooth that handoff by making communication more uniform and more standardized that way. But then on top of that, you have the code generation, which means we're literally working in the same with the same matter here. So I don't know if that answers the question entirely, Nick.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'll just add that, I mean, one of the there's a big trend out there to hate on XAML and prefer things like C# markup and stuff like that. But one of the reasons why we have declarative languages like XAML, and actually, if you look at the Uno C# markup, you'll actually realize that it's almost a one-for-one with the declarative approach that we have in XAML, and the intent is the same essentially. It's for people who want to work in C# but still want that sort of declarative way of drawing things up. But just getting back to the XAML point, I mean, the point of XAML was it was never really designed to be a human-readable language. I mean, it is because it's XAML, right? It's XML, but it was always designed to be the premise for a designer. And so, but it lends itself particularly well to doing code export from a tool like Figma into a format, XAML, that can then be ingested in an application. And so we're kind of capturing on that. And as Ludwig points out, we're in the material toolkit, we're using the nomenclature, so the components such as a text box and a combo box, ones that make sense in the context of an Uno platform app or a WinUI app. And the advantage there is that when we export through the plugin, what we're going to get is a series of elements or series of XAML elements that are going to work within the Uno platform world. So this particular toolkit file, Figma file, is designed to bring in the power of material design language and couple it with the sort of the naming conventions and the components from the WinUI land.
And if I may add to that, if I dare, as a non-developer, if you don't like XAML, the plugin also exports C#, so you have some options here.
So I think, Nick, I have a theory. This whole XAML hate thing, I think it's an age thing. Like older people like you and me, like we love XAML. Maybe the younger kids like Matt are not so much on board. But like you said, like it's not meant to be. It can get a little verbose, but then I mean, so can C#, so can other like fluent style ways. I mean, all we're doing here is designing a visual tree.
That's all right, Sam. I know that you have the XAML tattoo right next to your Silverlight tattoo. We're all in the same boat around here. Don't forget the Windows Phone tattoo that's on the other shoulder.
Oh no, I spent several years with it. At the end of the day, look, it's XML-ish thing. It is simple to write by hand. I actually do write quite a bit of XAML by hand. It's not bad, but there are tools to help you out. You don't have to write every Visual State Manager by hand because it will get verbose. But at the end of the day, we're just defining a visual tree. Do it in C# if that's what your heart desires. You have choices. So one more question here. Well, actually, two questions, and maybe I will hold one question here because I know, Matt, you like we have mentioned the material design a few times. Now you're talking about a design system, and I have questions about like what about the other ones. But I got more pressing things first. So. In here, Ludwig, I see that you are dropping in, UI pieces like a login screen, text boxes, and labels. What if I have, and again, I'm coming from my biased backgrounds because we make Telerik UI. What if I wanted to drop in, a Telerik component as a part of my design?
Okay, so I'll preface my answer by saying First of all, our components are flexible and overridable, so you can change the appearance and style of these components fairly easily. Yet there are still use cases where you will need something from the outside, and we do have a workflow for that. Um, Being a not a no-code solution, but a low-code solution, what we would suggest here as a workflow that works both for designers and devs is that the designer come up with a visual custom component that represents this chart from Telerik, and use that to drop into their layout so that they can gain consensus with the team and the stakeholders,
Right.
and then uh, create it using our plugin. You can tag that as being a custom external control, and
Hmm.
what happens there is that it will place uh, a little thumbnail
Hmm.
indicating where it goes in the layout, and it'll indicate the namespace. So I can give you an example of this
Yeah.
here.
No, the perfect. I mean, that's all we need. Just a placeholder. Doesn't need to be an exact. So
Right.
the devs know like this is where it goes in.
So this
Well,
is
the nice, sorry, just to cut in, Ludwig, I mean, the really nice thing about this is that when it's defined in the Figma file, you can specify the actual class name of the chart and the namespace, so that when you get the XAML or the C# markup out, it is actually that control. Right? So it's not just a
Mhm.
placeholder that the devs have to replace. They may have to go and adjust properties that aren't being surfaced in Figma, etc. But the layout should all be correct. The actual use of the correct component should be there already. So.
Yeah. So they say show, don't tell. So if I look at my tree here on the left-hand side, you can see that all of these are just like basic primitives, text, shapes, with layouts. So the code generated by this should be garbage or primitive. But because I've tagged my component here, and I've given it the namespace. When I do export, I'm going to refresh this. I
Oh,
have my
so it
bar
actually
chart
shows
here.
you a preview of the code that it's gonna
It
generate.
shows you yeah,
Nice.
exactly. You have the entire code here. You can copy paste into Visual Studio or whatever tool you're using, and then here in my preview, I can tell, okay, it's been inserted into the code. It's an external component, so I don't have all of the controls over it.
Yeah.
But I do have a reference for it in the code saying exactly where it goes and how it's named. Let's see if I can find it here. Yeah, line 14, and I can export that either in C# or XAML. Uh, did I say C#? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's correct.
Yeah. No, this is nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so going back to what Chris was trying to ask, like the styling of these components, like you're trying to create a login screen, like how that button and how each of the text boxes look. Is there a way to do CSS, or is it all XAML styles?
Um, Well, I think I can answer the design part or the mechanical
Yeah,
part of how you do that.
let's do the design. Yeah.
But in the end, Nick, correct me if I'm wrong. It will be exported as XAML or C#.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a subtle difference between, say, the Maui and Xamarin Forms world and the Uno world is that we don't support out of the box CSS. So the styling is, standard XAML styling or C# markup styling. So
Mhm.
Yeah. No, that's fair.
So,
Yeah.
so say I'm creating a text box here and I want to customize it. I can go to my assets panel and I can search through this listing or just do a quick search here and it'll surface the components that te- text text search, never talk and type, text box. Here you go. I can drop it in or I can just click on it and oh, Figma not cooperating with what I want to try and show you here. Let's try again. What I want to demonstrate is that you can style it using the component properties before dropping it into the canvas. Unfortunately, it's not working right now, but No fear, there's a way around this. So in my properties panel on the right side of the screen, I have all of the properties for this text box. So I can use the styles and variants that come preloaded here for me. So I don't have to actually drop in an icon, drop in a label, and I can just rename this label to email directly. Notice I didn't go into my hierarchy tree. I didn't have to select anything. I just play with these knobs here and I get exactly what I need. I can just export that and I have a working live component here. Uh,
Nice.
and with all the states. So I didn't have to draw, I didn't have to define the selected state. I didn't have to draw the icon. I didn't have to draw the clear icon. It's all preloaded for me. And if that's not enough flexibility, I can still play around with this. Say I need something that's
Like
more rounded.
rounded corners, yeah.
Yeah, let's say, I don't know, let's make it super rounded. And I'm going to try and change this for a search icon because our file comes preloaded with hundreds of icons, dozens of components, and those components have hundreds of variants, anywhere between 2 and 126 variants. The text box is maybe one of the more complex ones. And then when I refresh, my update is ready, so is the code, and I can share this
Nice.
with Nick, and
Yeah.
he doesn't have to spend the time interpreting my design. So that's a huge productivity
Yeah.
booster, and it's a huge help to communication because I'm talking about text boxes. I'm not talking about a text input or whatever other name I would come up with. So he doesn't have to parse that and figure out what component I'm referring to, and then try and reproduce my design. It's all done.
Hey,
So
just to call
Yeah.
out one thing as well, I think we kind of glossed over it a few times. If you, Ludwig, just go back to the preview window for a second.
sure.
And if no one's seen the plugin before, when we've shown it here, the preview, which a lot of other tools have this notion of a preview and stuff like that. The difference here is that preview is essentially a running component. So, Ludwig's pointed out that it's interactive, but that's interactive because what we're doing is behind the scenes exporting out of Figma, importing it into the running Uno platform WASM app, and executing the code, right? So that's actually a text
Interesting.
box. So the XAML that you see on the export page is actually what's being used to drive that input, right? So when you see a whole page there,
Nice.
you're
Yeah.
actually interacting with a whole page. You can scroll through items, you can interact with items, etc. Now, obviously, there's no code being executed there, so it's not like you're going to have code that when you click on a button, it's going to navigate to a new page, for example. But the interactive's there, so you can see what tabs look like when you focus or hit on them. You can see what happens, what the different tabs are going to look like at the top there.
Yeah.
Scroll through the list, and even the contents of that list. You can see that that's being driven by a data context, which is on the fourth tab. It's basically just a JSON file that can be used to drive that experience. So when you want to set up data binding and stuff like that, you can do all of that from within the plugin. So it's quite a rich capability, and it means that the designer can focus their attention on getting that experience right. And then the handoff to developer is that much easier because most of the things like the path for data binding, it's already done for the developer.
Yeah. No, this is very nice.
And
Now,
to
go ahead.
piggyback on that last part, though, as a designer, data binding might be intimidating. It might be something I'm not familiar with, and this is where Figma, being a cross-platform tool, is really great because I can just call up Nick and tell him, like, Nick, I'm having trouble with this. Could you please fix my data context? And he can run this plugin, start typing in here directly, and it's saved on the web, so I get the change immediately, and I don't have to figure out this part of it. So we can really collaborate here.
Yeah, this is nice. Now, one thing you mentioned, like when you're looking at the text boxes, like you talked about states, like the disabled state. So how is that carried forward to the devs?
Yeah, Nick, I'll let you talk about that about themes.
Yeah, sure. So the components that come out of Figma, in the sense, have these things called variants, and one of those variants would be a disabled variant. But those are really to showcase just in the design what it would look like when it's in that state. So Ludwig, I mean, perhaps with that text box that you got focused there, if you change the state to say hovered or disabled, maybe, you can see the different subtlety there that it is disabled. Now, the carry through to the actual running app and the export is actually no different, right? So there is no extra exported there. And so what that's relying on is it's relying on the underlying visual states within the material design language, right? So in an Uno app, we would have the Uno material design file. So it's a part of the platform that you can reference. And so built into that, you have all of those preconditioned states, right? So you have the disabled state and those types of things.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So like there will essentially be like visual states in XAML?
Yeah. So behind the scenes, that's part of the material design language that ships as part of that theme library. Now, from a dev perspective, you can go in and customize that. But the premise here is that you want to start with a strong design system and stay within the bounds of that as much as possible within the what we're doing within Figma. And you'll actually find that there's a lot of configurability within that. So for example, if you're just changing subtle things like the color during the disabled state, then you can do that within Figma. And there's a bunch of overrides that then get applied through to the exported XAML. Ludwig, do you want to just show you on the export tab? There's a color export.
Yeah, sure. So I'm just going to refresh here so you can see the login screen. And when you export, you can scope your export to be the whole page or just the color dictionary, which will show you the light and
this
dark
is the
themes.
whole style. Nice.
Yeah, the whole style is right here. You can copy paste that. And when you preview, you can switch between themes, of course, and it stays live still. Yeah. So this is one of the reasons why the states aren't necessarily copied directly from the Figma files. You don't want to generate code that won't make sense, right? You don't want to generate a code where the text box is always disabled. So because it's a live app, we have to have that flexibility there, and that's why we still have to play together, devs and designers, right?
But Ludwig, just in terms of overriding colors, because this is quite an important part of customizing different styles and things like that. So, for example, if we were going to change the color of the disabled state for the text box, there is a page called the theme where we can go and actually take a preview of all of the different colors that are used to make up the material design language. And so you can go in and customize those. So maybe you could just pick up the primary color and customize that.
Yeah. So let's say pick a color, Sam. Tell me what you would like this app to look like.
Let's make it gory, like red.
Red, okay. All right. Let's go the other end of red. And okay. So what I've done here is I've edited one of the color styles, and I've only edited it in the light theme. And if I go back to my example app, you'll see that the color style is a global resource that'll affect everything here. And jumping back to themes, this allows me a huge amount of flexibility, but it also implies quite some work, right? Because I would have to change all of these resources one by one if I wanted to make my app theme red. But there's a better way to do this thanks to my developer friends who thought I was spending way too much time doing this. If I load up the plugin, there's a way to change the entire theme in just a few seconds, leveraging the material theme builder. You may have heard of this tool before. It's our good friends at Google who've put it together. It's basically a web resource that allows you to build a theme. Maybe I can switch over to I'll switch screens here. Give me a moment and I'll show you what that looks like. Sorry, there's something wrong. Apologies.
No, you take your time. While you're doing that, I got a question here, Nick. So I can see like Ludwig is designing one screen at a time in the app. Now the export looked like it did a export and a preview of the screen that you're working on. So you could export the code out for one screen at a time, or could you do all of it together? Like the whole app?
So currently it's screen by screen.
Screen by screen, okay.
You know, and particularly we kind of see that, you know, I guess for the initial concept of an app, you might want to do multiple screens. But as, you know, over the evolution, as people iterate them, the idea would be that designers are sort of iterating, you know, page by page and probably exporting individually. So
Yeah. Ludwig, I see your screen back up. So
All right,
you
thanks.
ready to bring it back? Yep,
Yeah,
there it
so
is.
I'm just gonna do a quick search for material theme builder. And it's the first link that comes up. Great. And I'm going to jump over to custom because I want to create a custom theme. Now, you said you wanted a red app. So I'm going to click on the primary color here on the left and just start playing around with these dials until I get something that I like. And you notice that this behind this content dialog here, the app is updating live. So you get a preview, a sense of what the colors you're picking would look like. And then they give you this whole color palette with all of the semantically named resources that you can handily export using this button at the top right. I'm going to export it as a material token DSP theme. Now, all of that took a couple of seconds. I'm just going to have to switch over again. Close this up, and sorry about the inception moment. Go back to Figma. All right. Can you see my screen now?
Yep.
All right. So I'm going to launch the plugin. Now remember, this was all to avoid having to change every single brush in this file manually, which is prone to error, which would take hours, and it is just a huge kind of blocker to adoption here. So what we did is we created this this feature here called the import DSP
Oh,
theme,
nice.
and this will launch. I brought my my Explorer. I can just open. I don't even have to unpack the zip file. Confirm the import. And did you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Everything in the app has
Beautiful.
updated
Yeah, beautiful.
in one swish. If I go to the themes page, it's all updated. My devs have all of the resources they need visually, but also if I preview this, in seconds, I have this new app. Look
Yeah.
at the code. My color overrides are all updated, ready to be shared. And the preview, I can toggle to dark mode. Okay, I'm not loving dark mode, so maybe I'm going to customize this. But in seconds, I had a massive global change to my design. So this
Yeah.
means anyone can just download this file, literally anyone. You don't need to be a designer. Download this file and start customizing the theme to look like their brand and just build their own app.
Yeah.
And
No,
just to
that's
add to that, if you do actually stick with the DSP theme that comes from the material builder, so that theme file, you can actually drop that DSP file directly into an Uno app, and that'll just get applied. So you don't actually need to do the export of the color overrides unless you go and start fine tuning the colors in the Figma file. So yeah, we've got capability in the actual running application to handle a DSP file.
Another nice thing here is you don't have to worry about making mistakes because Control Z is there for you. Figma has infinite undo, and the theme import is a non-destructive change. So if I hit it enough times, I go back to my purple theme.
Oh, interesting. Oh, very nice.
So,
Yeah.
play around, don't be afraid.
Yeah.
You can't break anything.
Okay, so once you have this and you are ready to ship it over to the devs, so like you showed some of the styles and then the color palettes in there. What if you give it off to Nick and Matt and they're off and working on their app, and then you do some A/B testing and you realize that you actually need to change up the color palette? What do you need to give them more? Like, how are the XAML styles like global, or is it on a per page basis?
So
Go ahead, Nick.
Okay. Yeah, I was just going to say that they're typically just a global resource. So they're just a matter of dropping them in as a XAML file. So we would typically have a dedicated XAML file for those color resources, and you can do font overrides the same way. So there's a font overrides file that you can specify, and those just get added to the to the application and periodically update it if the designer changes the colors or the themes. So,
right. Yeah. And if you want to go against the overall theme because you have a specific use case, not because you're a rebel, let's say here I have a destructive change button. I can just swap out colors here. I'll swap the primary color for the error color. And now I have a destructive change button, and that will be reflected as well in the code that I export.
Yeah, very nice, very nice. Okay, so you have had your hands on this as a designer. You are happy with the screens that you have, and now you're ready to hand this off to Nick and Matt. So what's the process like?
There is no process. I
It's
mean, they
live.
can literally open the file at any point. Remember, it's multiplayer. If I'm not, I can lock the file to. I can choose to invite whom I wish at which point. I can create branches and invite people specifically to those branches, and then the person can just select anything on Canvas and launch the plugin, export the code they need. Maybe they just want a couple of lines in the code.
Yeah.
Maybe they want the whole page. So they can do that themselves, or I can leverage this feature here in Figma, which is the share button. This kind of blows my mind because when you select an element in this infinitely huge canvas, there's no limit to it, and hit the copy link button here, it copies the link to the specific frame you've selected. So I can shoot off a message in Teams saying like, this screen is ready, or this element is ready, and then they can pick it up themselves, or I can export it for them because it's text, right? So I can copy paste it into Teams.
Yeah, I like the fact that as a designer, you can also lock it. Like, do not mess this up. Like, I'm done. I need you to just honor this.
Yeah.
I remember years ago, I was, if you don't remember, back when Windows Phone was a thing, one of the first apps that we did was for the local airline company, Qantas. And so we built their first app here. And Shane Morris, who previously worked at Microsoft, runs a design studio, Automatic Studio. Him and I were working on this together. So designer, developer, it was like the ultimate story. And I remember us just, trying to avoid stepping on each other's toes because we were literally working in the same files. Like he was doing, using Blend to adjust the XAML, and occasionally I'd have to get in there and adjust things. And he would tell me off and scorn me for the way that I'd done certain things in XAML.
Blend, that's a name we haven't heard in a while. Our good friend Dan Siegel is in the chat room. Hey, Dan.
Hey, Dan.
Right. Some of us got together in Seattle last week. It was good to see Jerome was there. I think Martin was there. Dan, I don't remember anybody else, but yeah. Okay, so we have the designs, right? Now, Nick, how would you take this and start building the functionality in the app?
Yes, so if you switch to my screen, I'll just give a quick demo of essentially picking up one of our sort of showcase files. So there are a couple of different workshops that you can run through for the Uno platform. So we have Simple Calculator, we have Tube Player, sort of their end-to-end kind of workshops where you can start from a brand new app. There's a corresponding Figma file where you can bring in the designs, or you can do them from scratch in C# or XAML, depending on your preference. In this case, this is the Tube Player app, and if I just zoom out slightly, you can see that it's got the various screens. It is essentially two screens, although what we've got here is essentially 4 versions of the same first screen, so sort of showing the different states of it. We're going to just look at this first screen here and focus on the export from there. So essentially, imagine the designer has gone through the process of pulling this together, so search box, list of items, etc. Much as Ludwig has already shown us. I'm going to pull up the plugin. And let me just move things aside so that you can still see the screen here.
No, you're still in the Figma plugin, the Uno Figma plugin here.
That's correct. Okay, so this is a different Figma file, but it was started using the material, the material toolkit that Ludwig's been talking about. So the process there would be typically you'd go and get a copy of that material toolkit, you'd rename the file so that you recognize which one it is, you'd start a new page, and that's where you'd be developing or designing out your application. So you can imagine this scenario, we've gone through that process, we've created this particular page for the tube player screens, and these are going to be the screens for my application. And so it is just a copy of that material toolkit file. But I'm going to select this page, and as Ludwig showed before, I come to my export page, I hit refresh, and I hope that I've actually selected the right thing. It should do. There we go. So that's the XAML, but if I switch to C# markup, you can see that I can. Yeah. So, and my point earlier was actually, if you look at that comparative to the XAML, you'll actually see that the structure is very much the same. It's kind of almost got identical indentations, the same nesting. It's just a fluent version of what was there in XAML.
Just to make Dan happy, the C# markup.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, do your thing. Like, I don't think in particular, like the C# is less verbose, but it's a matter of preference. Like, if that's how you want to define your visual tree, have at it.
Yeah, no, look, absolutely. And what's been really interesting about this process is that from the convenience things that we see in C#, we're actually seeing stuff that, really highlights where XAML could be doing a better job. So I think that there's an opportunity there for XAML to improve. And even if it's a matter of just building custom components, and we'll see some of those in the toolkit. In the most recent release, we had a responsive view that's part of the toolkit that allows us to easily configure, different views for different sort of form factors and sizes. Behind the scenes, that's just visual states, right? So we've had visual states for a while. We've had adaptive triggers for a while. But it's always been one of those things that developers don't really easily understand. They need to know storyboards or setters and properties and visual states in general. And it's just not overly intuitive. But with this responsive view, you can literally design what it's going to look like in portrait, what it's going to look like in landscape. And then based on those breakpoints, it's going to adapt to those. There's more incremental approaches, so you can actually, attribute certain properties to be, portrait and landscape specific values. You don't have to do the whole page in that responsive view.
Makes sense.
So just coming back to what I was going to show quickly before Dan interrupts us again.
Dan is saying he was made to do C# markup against his will.
Yeah, you're still not forgiven, Dan. Still not forgiven. But just joking aside, like it's horses for courses. Whatever you feel most comfortable with is what you should be using. And the idea behind the Uno platform is definitely support developers in the mode that they feel most comfortable. So for this example, much to against my judgment, we're going to use C# markup. And I'm just going to literally copy that out. And then all we're going to do is switch to my application. Now, this is the tube player application. So if I zoom in here, you can see basically this is the structure of the Solution Explorer. You can see that we've got some fairly well-named folders such as presentation. It's going to have our view models and our page layouts in. We've got some services for calling services to pull back some data from YouTube, etc. And of course, one of the things that we've got in there is our main page. So, this is going to be that main search experience page. Currently, it's looking pretty vacant. Despite the rest of the code that for the actual application is going to run, all I'm going to do here is literally drop it in that markup. Now, I have bumped up the font size, so it's a little hard to see all of the markup there. But essentially, this is the exact code that I just copied out of Figma, and I'm going to hit run on that.
It did actually save all of your indentation in the way the visual tree was described, so that's nice.
Yeah, exactly. And so, we've made sure that the export out of Figma is nicely laid out, particularly for C# markup. And so there we have it. Literally the same application we saw in the Figma file is here. And just to prove a point, I'll be my own narcissist and just look up my own name. And there we go. This guitar player keeps on surfacing. I'm glad that I bumped him off the top of the search list, but
We know what
There wasn't
your
having a common
side
name.
hustle is now, Nick.
That's right. Yes, it's either that or I think I'm a football player on some ilks as well. So, anyway, look, that's as basic as it gets. I mean, and there's a couple of other things. So, like for example, if you do have the color overrides, then you can copy those to an additional file. But that's in essence it. I mean, it's designed to be that simple. You know, I mean, if we go down the path of customizing some of the code in C# markup, or XAML, if that's what you're doing, in the developer space, then, you know, Git is a wonderful thing. And so when you copy the file again, or the contents in from Figma, you'll see that there's diffs in the area that the design has changed, and diffs in the sense, you know, the areas that you've changed as a developer. So long as the structure doesn't change dramatically, you're not going to lose those changes. You just don't commit those changes. You know, delete the parts that you actually want to keep. So, you know,
and
so that's pretty much the handover story.
So, and so on the dev side, like if you were to have like a Telerik or any other custom, you know, component, you're going to get that from the import. Then you bring in the NuGet packages and you just swap them out in that placeholder.
Literally exactly. And actually, as I mentioned before, the placeholder probably doesn't change. It's probably just additional properties or maybe some nested elements that you want to specify to, you know, customize the series. If it's a bar chart, for example, you may have some customized data binding, because obviously charts are a little bit more complicated in terms of the data binding structure that they need to support. But yeah, so in essence, I mean, it'll come in as one element from Figma, but then, you know, you customize it according to how you want the app to look for that third-party component.
Now, in a Uno platform project, like the styles and the global things that, you know, Ludwig was talking about, where do they go?
Right here we have, and this is actually, again, very similar in XAML. There's a thing called app resources, which is basically where we're defining our you know, what would be XAML styles, but they're obviously done here in C# markup. And this is basically a reference point for the other style files. So, for example, we have a color palette overrides. Let me just zoom into there so you can see it. So if I come here, I can basically, so these ones right here are where the overrides files would go. Okay, and again, those are just C# markup files, right? So if we come in here, you can actually see that they are just color definitions as they would be exported from Figma, right? So you can literally just copy and paste from Figma into here to replace those as needed. So
and if you were not using C# markup, like, could you just drop in a XAML style in here?
Yep. So in XAML, there would be the equivalent XAML file. So it would literally be called color panel override.xaml, and you just drop the XAML file into there. Exactly. And so you know, nearly all of this is set up from the Uno platform template. So, you know, as you go through the process of creating your app, you can go ahead and actually pick XAML, C#, and then you can actually pick between, you know, material or Fluent. If you just give me a second, why don't I just quickly show you that? So there's a couple of different versions of the wizard, one of which we are more recent. So let me just do new.platform Uno. You probably don't want to see the Australian news.
It's not as bad as the American news.
Okay, so if you're coming from Visual Studio, obviously we have the extension that fits into Visual Studio that comes with the Uno platform template. When you go to create an Uno platform app, you will see a customized wizard. You won't see this first page because obviously Visual Studio takes care of that. So let's call it Cube Player Extreme, and and so, but you will be presented with this. So it's kind of two options to start with. So blank is basically just bare bones. You just get the Uno platform. It's designed really for people who know what they're doing already and just want to bring in their own components. They know where to start. They know what they want to do already. The recommended approach basically comes with more options already pre-configured. If you don't want to go with either of those, pick the customize option. You end up on the same screen. And it gives you all of the different options. So we can do framework. Obviously, you know, as we get into the .NET 9 framework, you know, period, we'll start to see options appear there. Platforms, basically you can pick which platforms you want to include by default. Just because you exclude it at this point doesn't mean you can't add it back later, and vice versa. Obviously, if you include it now and don't want it later, you can just remove it. Presentation, you can pick between MVVM, which is the more traditional approach, versus MVUX, more reactive style approach.
Yep.
We have markup, and the one that I want to talk about was actually themes. I was going
to ask that of Matt, because like you mentioned Fluent, like what if I have a different design system that I want to come in with?
Yeah, so out of the box, Win UI is Fluent by default. So basically, and that applies to all of the Uno platforms. So you will get that if you just pick the Fluent option. Obviously, if you want to go material, then you can pick that option from within the wizard. Just on this point, before we get sidetracked, from the web wizard, once you're ready to go, if you click the create button, what you get is a .NET New command. So you'll need to do .NET New install uno.templates, and then you can run this, and it will give you that new solution based on the options that you pick here. Because like obviously, if you're in Visual Studio, then you'll get that automatically.
So that's what Dan was pointing out. Like if you wanted to do .NET 9 previews already, you could from the CLI.
Yes.
All right.
With great power comes great responsibility. Don't blame us if it's not working for you. There's a reason why it's not in the wizard yet, Dan.
very early days. Yeah, very early days. Yeah. So now, if you pick the Fluent theme, what differences do you see, or is it the same kind of workflow that you start with some, basic design system assets, and then you can customize to your heart's desire?
So I'm probably not the best person to talk about this, but I'll start off, and Ludwig and Matt can jump in. Essentially, we don't have a fully fledged Fluent version of the material toolkit as of yet. There are Fluent libraries that are out there. So Microsoft has one that's published, but you won't get the same export capability that you have. Now, that said, there are ways of coercing the material toolkit to look more Fluent-ish in nature. Now, Matt, you had a bit of a prototype of this. Do you want to just share that?
Yeah.
Okay. So before we switch to Matt, anything else, Nick, that you wanted to show? Like, this is a nice, flow that you showed off. And like this last thing that you did, was it on the web or was it through the Visual Studio templates with Uno?
So the one that I just showed was actually through the web. So if you go to new.platform.uno, you've got the live wizard. It is a PWA, so you can dock it to your taskbar, do all of that fancy stuff. But yeah, as of today, it's basically an export for the CLI that allows you to just call the template.
Yeah, I like the fact, like on the left-hand side, like if you close out of this, like you had a lot of things. Like here's my presentation, here's my markup, here's my auth, here's my application and my testing. So you're kind of setting it all the way up to like the CI pipelines. So you're kind of thinking it through all the way.
Yeah, I mean, look, the idea is that we want people to be successful from the day zero. And so, you should be at a point where you can create your app, build your app, almost push it to the store without you actually having to cut any code. Now, obviously that's meaningless app, but but it should have all of the nuts and bolts that you need to get started. And so you shouldn't be worrying and spending hours trying to configure, say, MSAL to work, because we've got the nuts and bolts there. You can get in. You obviously for MSAL you will need to provide things like the client ID and stuff like that to get it to sync with Azure AED, that they don't call that Entra ID.
Entra.
But other than configuring those little things, the idea is that you'll have an app that's got those components already wired up, and that you should be successful from day zero, basically.
So you're trying to get the devs to as better of a starting point as possible. Yeah. Good stuff. All right, Matt, you had something to show as well. So let's switch to your desktop. All right, you're up.
Yeah. So like Nick said, right? You can build a Fluent style app through the wizard, but it doesn't translate in the Uno platform Figma workflow. So in that context, the idea here is really to just show the versatility and adaptability of the toolkit through things like Nick and Ludwig mentioned, through overrides and how those properties can be used to give your app a fluent look in this case, but the idea is really that you can adapt the material toolkit, the Uno platform material toolkit, to look tailored to your brand, to a different design system, through maybe a lot of manual design work. But the option is there if you don't want to be constrained to the material conventions. So what I did here is essentially I took the example app from the Fluent iOS kit. So they have a file app. It's like a SharePoint or a OneNote app. And I rebuilt it using only material components, everything provided from the toolkit here. So if I give it a refresh, so as you can tell, the colors I used like Ludwig mentioned, the DSP. I changed the whole theme of the app to follow material color conventions, fluent color conventions. Sorry, the style, the text styles were all updated to be SF Pro text, which is what iOS is using for Fluent. And I made all those changes, and then those are some global changes. So your text styles, your color styles, global changes that are applied everywhere. And then you can use the overrides to kind of fine tune your components to look and feel what you're going after. So in this case, again, I went for Fluent. And, as you can tell, it's essentially the skin is a Fluent looking app. So the backbone is still material, but you have the flexibility of really tailoring your UI to look however you want and really match your brand's identity. And then, the same rules apply, right? Here's all using data binding to fill in my app, and my code is there, and all the color overrides, all the changes that I made, the font overrides, color overrides. I mean, you won't tell with hex codes, but they're all using, the Fluent colors, font, same thing. It doesn't call it out specifically, right? But I have the option of really going into my text styles. Just here's just the example again, right? And I can go here and you have all the textiles that are provided by the toolkit, and you have the options of going in there and customizing the fonts, the weights, etc., and just really achieving the look and feel of what you're going after.
Yeah, no, this is very nice. And so the question to you and Ludwig, I mean, does the Figma marketplace offer, all of these varieties of styles and design system, assets that you can just bring in easily?
Absolutely. Microsoft offers directly a bunch of design systems for WinUI 3, Fluent 2 iOS, Fluent 2 web versions. Then Material shares its own official Figma file. And Apple even joined in recently. So there's an official Cupertino file there
Nice.
as well. It's really important. Sorry if I'm stressing this, but it's really important to know, though, that if you use the components from those other files, the Figma plugin generating the code won't recognize those as components. They'll recognize them as primitives and generate, layouts with text blocks and
Yeah.
primitive shapes in there. If you really want that, the power of leveraging full components and getting really clean code, start from the Uno Material Toolkit and build in there. And if there's anything you can't do, drop us a line on Discord. I'm there answering questions all the time, and so is the rest of the team. And if we need to add anything to our backlog, we're taking notes. We're always trying to improve this. So yes, the marketplace is rich. It has a bunch of resources you can use to inspire your work and level up your work. Um, uh, but in the end, you should be able to either reproduce or make anything you imagine from these components that we're providing here.
Yeah, well said. Okay, so to dovetail off that, this is a lot of engineering, as I can imagine, pulling this off. So are you giving this away for free, or what's the deal with using the Uno platform Figma plugin?
Well, I'll take the plugin part. So as you know, Uno is an open source project, so pretty much everything in Uno is free, but the exception is the plugin. It was in beta for about a year where everyone could use it freely, and you can still try it for free. So it's like a freemium system we have going where you invoke the plugin and you can do 15 code exports monthly, no charge, and all features work. And then after you've used your 15 exports, all the features except export work. So, and I think it's like $9 a month. You can try it for just a month if you like, and you can get a 25% discount if you grab the annual subscription. So there's the plugin, there's a small charge for that, but otherwise everything else, including the Figma file itself, if you want to use it as a design system, uh, all free for anyone to use.
No, I think that's more than fair, because engineering is expensive. You have to do the right thing and also support your customers, because much of this maybe is for a team which has designers and devs. Like it's a team where you want that nice handoff, and it's for enterprises to see the value in this type of a developer designer handoff.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's the
and
path we're taking.
one more, maybe a weird question here. What if I am doing a .NET MAUI app? Because, like, as a .NET developer, now you have some choices here. I know I can embed all of my MAUI, UI components inside of Uno platform, but can I leverage this in any way?
Nick? Oh, you're muted.
My apologies, I was muted. Yes, I have some wild animals screaming in the back. No, I'm
Oh,
only joking.
no.
It's that time of the morning here.
Australia and wild animals, surprise.
All right.
Yeah, exactly. I've got to live up to the reputation, No, I think I think the simple answer is not easily. The reality is that there's subtle naming differences between a lot of the elements in MAUI as versus the ones in WinUI. Some of them are consistently the same, so things like a text box and a text block and stuff like that are going to be similar or same. But there are subtle differences that will be frustratingly annoying if you're copying XAML or C# markup across. Well, C# markup won't work because they have a different form of C# markup. But even the XAML sort of language is subtly different. And I think that it would be more frustrating to try and copy things from the design as opposed to it. Not to say it's not possible, but it would require some tweaking each time you export it. So it's just subtle things like stack panel becomes stack layout, etc. Those little subtle differences.
Yeah. I mean, and if you have like MAUI UI, like from Telerik, like we can just create the screens in Uno platform and just drop in the controls, drop in the views within the context of design. So that's totally fair. Now let's see. I mean, now this is a lot. You're talking about the designer story and then the handoff. What if I'm a little overwhelmed? I want to learn this. Like, are there any docs? Is there any training? Are there any resources?
Yeah, I can take that one. We actually have quite a bit. So, like Nick mentioned, we have two workshops, the simple calc and the two-player that he demonstrated earlier. Both of those are available as full workshops, which have the option of using the Figma workflow or skipping over it entirely and kind of using the traditional method. And otherwise, we have Figma files, which are essentially the toolkit remixed to different screens. So, different example apps that you can kind of use to build off of or use entirely as is. We have.
Sorry, Matt. Just while you're on that point, do you want to just switch to the getting started tab on the current Figma file? The reason I suggest this is that if you're new to the Figma file, this is actually just a good way of exploring and getting familiar with it. There is also complementary documentation on
nice.
the Uno doc site that goes with that, that elaborates a little further on it.
Yeah, this is a lot. Good stuff.
Yeah, we try to keep the documentation in the file specific to working with this file and with Uno, but Figma has a treasure trove of documentation itself. So it's pretty easy to pick up any question you'd have. You can easily Google and answer will be right there.
Yeah, yeah. So just to maybe wrap things up here, how do you folks see cross-platform development going forward with Uno platform and Figma? Are there any recommendations in how people are going to use this plugin in terms of their workflows? Like how do you picturize your ideal workflow?
So look, from a developer perspective, we're obviously looking at other ways, or continuing that, closing the gap between the designer and the developer story, because that is, I would say, from the experience I've had building apps, one of the more time-consuming parts is getting the user experience right for an app.
Yeah.
Now, it's notwithstanding the code part, it has some complexities, but definitely getting the UI and I don't mean this to be in a negative way, but pixel pushing, just making sure that all the alignments are correct, the animations are correct, all of those types of things. The subtleties of getting an app to look from, going from being, what a developer would create out of the box to being looking like a first party or a classic app. That's where we see, there's an opportunity there. We've obviously started down that road with the Figma toolkit and the plugin, but there's definitely some, work that we could do to improve that further. If you're talking wider at the Uno platform, I'm not going to give the game away, but we've got a release coming up. There's some really good improvements around developer productivity and just simplification of the whole Uno space. As you can imagine, if you come from cross-platform, whether it doesn't matter what toolkit or language you're doing, whether it be in the .NET space, so Maui, if you're in the other platforms like Flutter, etc., there is an inherent complexity of being cross-platform.
Yeah, for sure.
Trying to do stuff that's consistent across all of these different platforms, it is difficult and leads to a relatively complex experience. And so, the Uno platform is always looking for ways to simplify that, making it as streamlined a process as we possibly can. And continue to work on the support for, enabling developers to build stuff where they're most comfortable. So it doesn't matter if they're coming to us from Linux or Mac or whatever, and building for those platforms. So, if you're on Linux and you're building for Android, you should be able to do that because it's supported, like the Android SDK is there. If you're on Mac and you want to build iOS or WASM, you should be able to do that from, say, within VS Code. And then obviously the premier experience is Visual Studio on Windows, and you should be able to do all of the platforms, except for Catalyst, maybe, from there.
Yeah, well said, well said. And one thing that you said maybe also struck with me, like if I am building an app as an indie dev and I choose a platform, I do not have the luxury of having Ludwig on my team because I'm just one person doing this. Maybe my app doesn't need to look hideous like the way devs build our apps like Battlefield Gray. Maybe I can start here and I can start with the material, a theme and have a good starting point. So even though I'm a dev, even though I don't have design chops, I can start with something that is easily modifiable. And it's a good starting point of how my app looks.
And look, from a developer perspective, the learning experience to get to a point where you're functionally able to do stuff in Figma is relatively short. Now, I don't claim that I'm now a designer or that I've got anywhere near the capabilities of somebody who's proficient with the tools like Ludwig. But the backstory here is that I volunteered to do a presentation at NDC Sydney.
Oh, there
and
you
in
go.
the lead up to that, and that was all on the Figma plugin, which I really never dealt with or played with at all in the development because I wasn't on that part of the Uno team. And so, I spent, a number of hours, getting this brain dump from Ludwig and said, okay, well, this is the basics of how you do stuff in Figma. He had a lot of patience for it, which was
I mean, go ahead, Ludwig.
But best student ever. I mean, he's making it sound like we were 8-hour-long sessions and I had to repeat myself. No.
No.
It's just,
But that was the point, right? Is
I
that
think it was like maybe three calls, 2 or 3 calls, and
yeah,
you had it, and you were able to present to people live, and you were super comfortable
Yeah.
with it. So, I mean, anyone can do it. And not only Nick's a dev. Matt has been doing a bunch of UIs for our marketing team, and he just learned Figma on the fly, and he's doing great work that we share with everyone. So I think it's accessible to everyone. And
Yeah.
to your original question, I think we're blurring the lines here between dev and designer tools, and I think that's how we're going to get less friction between the two. But it's also important that we all stay in the tools that we're most efficient in and
Yeah.
most comfortable with, and it's the interoperability. I think that's where we're going, and there's a big gain and there's a big win to be had there.
Yeah, well said. Like as a dev, like just the Uno platform Figma plugin, this is not as scary to me as opening up a Adobe or a full-on design surface area.
yeah,
I can learn. I can learn this. This is, like you said, you're blurring the lines here. So
yeah.
no, this is really great work here, folks. Really amazing that you are trying to tell that story better and cause less friction. Yeah, very good stuff. So, Matt, if nothing else, I'm going to bring down your desktop.
Yep.
What's next for you guys? Obviously, this is keeping you busy, but what are you looking forward in the next near future?
Well, I'll kick that off. As I alluded to, we do have a release in the pipeline, and if people are watching the various repos, they'll know that we're getting very, very close to stable updates. And I'm going to throw Dan under the bus, blame him if it doesn't work. But no. In all seriousness, the team's focused on making sure that we don't release until we're ready. So.
No, this is all really good stuff here, folks. I appreciate all the work, all the engineering behind this. And you're trying to make something that's intrinsically difficult, like you said, Nick, like cross-platform dev, targeting so many platforms. It's never easy, but you're trying to take on a beast, and you're trying to make it easier and easier if possible for devs and designers. So there's much to be appreciated about that. So I appreciate you folks taking the time out of your busy day, and Nick in the middle of your night to come hang out with me. This is much, much appreciated. Love all that you folks are doing. Keep it up. Keep making things easier and easier for devs and designers.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah,
Thanks for having us, Sam. A lot of fun.
Yeah, all right,
Appreciate it.
folks. What's Dan saying? Dan is always trying to pull my leg. Yeah. So all good things here, folks. So take a look. Everything starts at Uno platform, pretty much, and then you can get to the plugins from the main homepage. So take a look, play around. Like Ludwig said, this is all in the works. So give them feedback, on things that can be improved, things that can be features in the future. So give it a spin and see what you can build with it.